Hello and welcome to Open Timelines. I'm your host, Sebastian Martin, and today we have the privilege to interview Dave Scott. Dave Scott is the creator and host of Canada's Spaced Out Radio, running Monday through Friday nights at spacedoutradio.com. A former radio journalist, Dave graduated with a diploma in broadcast communications from one of Canada's top broadcasting schools, BCIT, in 1998. Dave then spent 10 years in radio, mostly working in sports, before leaving the field to pursue other interests. Dave's personal quest into the unknown started in December of 2011, when he had contact from what he calls the angel of death, that he saw in his mother's eyes, which led to his first channeling experience. After this incident, Dave's personal experiences started becoming more frequent. Paranormal experiences, premonitions also coming true. A Bigfoot sighting with two of the creatures within 100 feet of him. UFOs started appearing anytime he wanted, even though Dave had no idea what summoning was. And personal sightings of 6 extraterrestrials, one who he's nicknamed Carl. Dave, welcome to the show.
Hi, how you doing? If you're seeing me kind of dodging away on camera, it's because I'm trying to play professional interviewee right now and stay-at-home dad at the same time, where my little guy has a friend over. So I do apologize if we do get interrupted, but I am paying attention, Sebastian. And I do want to start off by saying it was an absolute pleasure to finally meet you and hang out with you for a couple days at Architects of the New Paradigm in Vancouver. You are a straight up fantastic gentleman, and I think people like you in this field gives us more credibility for what we are doing, my friend. And kudos to you for being a sound, honest voice in a system that seems to be so filled with jealousy, with anger, with hatred, with disinformation. So you, to me, my friend, after getting to know you for a couple of days, what a breath of fresh air, and the privilege really is mine to be able to share this with you.
Well, thank you, Dave. I really appreciate that. And I have to say, you made the same impression on me. And when we first met, I mean, we met over the messenger, and we chatted a few times way back when, probably back in 2017, I believe.
16.
17, yeah. And we never actually met, directly, but I felt that connection with you without really even knowing your story. And it all started with the date of December 2011. And as you recall, my own experiences started in November of 2011. To do with ETs, not so much the angel of death, but I will. There's a reason why I think I do believe in synchronicities, and I think there's a lot of that in your life as well. So I would like to start with asking you about your own experiences. So you started having some sightings and some clairvoyancies, I guess, before 2011. Can you start with that?
Yeah, previous to 2011, I had seen 2 UFOs. One was when I was about 21 years old, and the other one was a few years later. And, the first one was like I'm going to use it because it's a famous term now. It almost looked like a tic tac, an orange tic tac in the sky that had a real deep buzzing sound, a little bit deeper of a sound than a C-130 Hercules cargo plane. And where I lived at the time, we lived across the Trans-Canada Highway from an airport. And the airport usually shut down at midnight. And I remember it was about 2:30 in the morning. Now, a lot of people will say you're 21 years old. It was a weekend. You were probably out with your friends and having a few beers. I was always designated driver for my friends. And I come from a family of alcoholics, and I went the other way. And I mean, you saw, how much did I drink at that conference?
None.
Nothing, right? And so I really pushed it to see this UFO. It was very interesting because I'd never seen anything like that. And, as a kid, I'd always said, you're sitting around a campfire. I said there was 3 things that I wanted to see in life. I wanted to see a ghost, I wanted to see a UFO, and I wanted to see Sasquatch, and I've seen all 3 now. And, so that was my first real experience into the paranormal realm was that UFO. A few years later, my ex-wife and I, we were coming back from Seattle, and over the exact same airport, we saw a red orb doing figure eights in the sky at about 8:30 at night when it's dark. And this was, I believe this was October or November. I can't remember the year, but it was the early 2000s. And from there, I had worked in a haunted building. I had lived in a haunted house. And that was the extent of my paranormal experience. I had never really thought about getting into this. It wasn't even a pipe dream, you know. I mean, I think we all kind of learned from the days of Art Bell scaring the hell out of us on Coast to Coast AM, and God rest Art's soul for opening up and really starting a genre and being a pioneer in this type of broadcasting. And I think he opened our minds up a little bit to the possibilities of what could be possible out there. And when we opened it up and we started thinking about, wow, I remember sitting in our radio station, man, in Vancouver, who was, where we would be running all news, and I'd be the sports guy on the desk that night. And outside of our studios, we would have Art Bell playing in the background on a competing radio station. I mean, that's just the impact that Art had. And, God bless him for it. So I really thought nothing of it. When I got out of radio mainstream in 2007 to take on a career in finance, I never looked back. And it wasn't until 4 years later, on December 13th, 2011, when I had this very, very profound experience where I saw the angel of death in my mother's eyes. It wasn't even a thought. And little did I know that it was going to push me into this entire paradigm and life shift.
Mm-hmm. So you described it as the angel of death. Can you start with it? I mean, with the beginning.
Absolutely.
How happened, please?
You got to realize my entire life changed in about 2-3 seconds. I was 38 years old, and it was December 13th, 2011 at around 7:45 p.m. And what happened there, Sebastian, was I had ended up having a family dinner at my house for an early Christmas. My daughter was going on a vacation over the Christmas time and New Year's with her mother's parents, so my daughter's grandparents. And she was going to be gone for about 17, 18 days. So we decided as a family that what we were going to do was we were going to have an early Christmas for her. So that way she could have all of the family open her gifts and have a turkey dinner and sing Christmas carols and do what you want. So we had about 25 people in my house that night, 25 people. And I remember the Vancouver Canucks were playing on the television. I can't tell you who they were playing, but I know there was a hockey game on that night. And we were standing around, and all of a sudden about 7:45, my parents announced they were going to get ready to leave. So in my house at that time, I was standing and collecting up some dishes, some dirty plates from our dining room. And I had to walk through a doorway into my kitchen where everybody else was, because my kitchen was kind of connected to my television room. And that's kind of where everybody had huddled for the night. So I'm standing there and I start to walk through that doorway from my dining room to my kitchen. And my mother is right there. And I go to open up my arms to give my mother a hug and give her a kiss goodbye, because I love my mom. And, if you don't do that, you're probably not a good child. But anyways, as I started to go through the doorway, I'm like half a step through the doorway. I noticed that there was no sound coming from the television and everybody else was standing still. And I looked at my mother and I opened up my arms, and my arms are open, and I looked at my mother. My mother has these beautiful blue eyes. And her eyes were jet black and her pupils were white. And trying to explain this verbally, it's very tough, because no matter how I put it, this is the only way I know how to put it, but nobody will really understand the profound impact this next part had. as I'm looking in my mother's eyes, I remember I kind of cocked my head to the right, like, like a dog would do. Am I seeing what I'm really seeing?
Mhm.
And my mother all of a sudden got a look on her face, kind of like, oh, you see me. And then she shook her head, and I started to get sick to my stomach, and I wanted to cry immediately. And as my mother was shaking her head, all of a sudden, poof, her eyes are blue. And she comes in, gives me a hug, like nothing is happening. Sound goes on the TV. People are now talking, and everything is back to normal.
Mm-hmm.
So this is literally 2-3 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And here I wanted to cry. And I gave my mom a hug, and I immediately walked to my bedroom. And my wife saw me kind of storm off, and she walks over and she goes, what happened? And I said, I just saw the angel of death in my mother's eyes. And she goes, oh my God. So I kind of, got my emotions intact. I walked back to the doorway where my parents were at the door about to leave, gave my dad a hug, gave my mom another hug and kiss, and they went on their way. We still had a bunch of people in the house for a couple more hours. And then afterwards, we put the kids to sleep. And then afterwards, my wife and I went back into our living room where our couches were kind of, across from each other with a table in between. So we were just learning about all this spiritual stuff. I really wasn't into it. My wife was very into it, and she would go to meditation sessions, and her abilities were getting enhanced. So we're sitting there. She puts a white candle on the table in between us. I'm on one couch. She's on the other opposite of me. And she goes, why don't you just relax and try and figure out what it was you saw? I said, okay. I only have blips of memory of the next 38 minutes of what happened. But this is what I do know is I channeled, as I relaxed, I channeled the angel of death. Okay. Oh. Now, previous to this happening, I didn't know what channeling was. To me, channeling was grabbing your remote control and flicking through the channels, mm-hmm. right? I didn't know the whole spiritual aspect of it, but the angel of death came in me, and I could feel him. And this is what I recall happening, was him saying to me, because I got to get this right. He said, sort of along the lines of, because you saw me, because I saw him, he felt he owed me an explanation as to what he was doing. See, my mother is a 2-time cancer survivor of colon cancer and breast cancer. Mm-hmm. So 2 bouts of chemotherapy. I mean, the poor lady has just had the health kicked out of her. All right. So basically what happened was he said through me that my mother, who had, in our estimation as a family, as callous and as cruel as this sounds, had become very addicted to sympathy. You would call up mom on the phone and she would answer it sounding perfectly healthy, like, hello. And you go, hey, mom, it's me. And she'd be like, oh, I'm in so much pain, the pain, and you'd be sitting there like, really? You just answered the phone, hello, sounding perfectly fine. Are you trying to milk this or what? And as a family, as rude as this is for me to say, but you got to admit it, okay? We started pulling away from my mother. Like we as children, even my father and other people in the family were sick and tired of this sympathy card my mother was playing. Mm-hmm. Well, the angel of death basically slapped me around in this channeling session and said, my mother was indeed sick. Okay. And he said, if we as a family did not start treating my mother with more love and respect, he was going to take her home. Mm-hmm. He didn't say heaven or hell. He said, take her home.
Right.
So and that was very, very profound mm-hmm. for what I was hearing. And that's all I remember from that conversation. And from that day forward, it has just been experience after experience.
Mm-hmm. So were you raised like Christian?
No.
No.
I was raised in a hockey rink and a baseball diamond. And that's the reality of it.
So you were not really afraid of the repercussions of trying to channel an angel of death, not worrying about your future, your destiny, how this could impact your life. You didn't really think about it.
No, I had no time to think about it. It just happened.
Right.
Right. I mean, it was so automatic and it was so, how would you put it? It was so traumatizing,
Hmm.
but I'm going to say traumatizing in a positive way.
Okay.
All right. Like it woke me up and it was like, holy cow, this happened. And immediately, the journalist in me that had been gone for 4 years all of a sudden needed answers.
Hmm. Have you ever thought of why the angel of death would be, or like you would be able to see him through your mother's eyes on that day? Do you know why he would be there?
Not at all.
I say he, it could be a she, but
I'll tell you this was an extreme male presence. So
okay.
using he is in my opinion would be the correct term to do this.
Okay, fair enough. So, in terms of the eye quality as to why they were jet black, is there a reason why? Do you think? Like, is it because of the association with death and the darkness
I
in the
Yeah,
eyes?
and I have thought about that numerous times, and I think because we don't know what's on the other side. People profess to know, but we really don't know what's on the other side. And I mean, let's face it, death is darkness.
Hmm.
Death is also light.
Hmm. That's right.
And so the darkness that covered up the blue part of my mother's eyes, but the pupils yet were white.
Hmm. Right.
Right. So I think it was a combination of both of everything that just kind of happened. And
Mhm.
it just kind of started steamrolling everything into effect.
It reminds me a bit of like Meet Joe Black with Brad Pitt. When you've got
Yeah.
the spirit, who's there is impersonating Brad Pitt, and then he just has that presence, like that physical form, but it could be uh, embedded into people's bodies, trying to feel, if they come close to death, or almost like to welcome them in their journey. This is very
Yes.
spiritual, but at the same time, it raises a lot of questions as to know why
Yes.
an angel of death would be able to control our destiny. So, like, bring your mother, like, let's say, send her to heaven quicker than expected because of the environment she lives in. That, to me, is very significant. Like, you could be, having a bad diet, you could have, cancer, and then you die from various circumstances. But in your case, you saw the angel of death. You recognize that you saw him, and then he just gave you a sermon, for saying, if you don't treat your mother better, I will take her home. You know, does it mean that we are not actually in charge of our destiny, or it's not really set in stone? Like, we could be, going through a different timeline. Like, we could be.
Yeah.
It's not like,
I,
black
I,
and
I
white.
think I think the way I kind of looked at that scenario was basically my mother was hurting. She
Hmm.
was hurting for love. She was hurting for affection from her family. She was hurting for some sort of regard and counseling and the way a family is supposed to do things.
Hmm.
All right. And we were not giving that to her. We were not holding up that end of the bargain.
Hmm.
And, you know, I could see where, the trauma of the health combined with the trauma of not getting any love, admiration, respect that a mother should from her family, as the matriarch of the family, I can see where the angel of death would say, screw you guys. You're not treating her with any respect. I'm going to take her home where she's going to get filled with love. Because, and I say that because even though I'm not a religious person, I
Hmm.
do have a very strong spiritual belief in God and Jesus. I have my own relationship with them.
Hmm.
Okay. And this is an entirely different conversation, but in my belief, from what I have seen from a lot of churches and religion, it's man made. It's the spiritual gift that we have been given from God, Jesus, and whatever you want to believe is something completely different than a man made message. So I try and keep my own spirituality in check and, I don't push it on anybody. I don't, try and manifest to say I am 100% right, but I don't agree with basic religion and the rules and guidelines that tend to go along with that, because I think it's all misinterpreted by a book that was edited for King John.
Right, I agree.
Hundreds.
On the other hand, have you asked your mother if she felt anything that day?
She doesn't recall a thing. Does not recall it. Doesn't recall feeling it. For her, nothing happened.
So there was no differences, obviously, before and after the events. Like she didn't really feel any better. She was still in the same position.
She did start feeling better. I mean, I'm proud to say, and my mother just turned 76 a couple of months ago. Mm-hmm. Or 75, pardon me. And she was very, 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 I mean, this is a lady who was not able to hold up a rolling pin or a dish plate. And when my son was born in 2013, this was a lady who all of a sudden was reinvigorated with energy, where she was able to hold my son and carry my son and pick him up. And to this day, she can now do that. So, to think about it on an emotional human level, to think about it that if we hadn't followed those guidelines, would my mother have ever met my son? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's the ultimate what if. You know what I'm saying?
That's true. On the other hand, to be the devil's advocate, it could be that the chemotherapy treatments was successful and she was just on the recovery path.
I mean, she struggles. I mean, even today, I mean, she is struggling with kidney problems now that everything is linked to that chemotherapy. Mm-hmm. And for me to believe that in doing this show for 3.5 years and a lot of research into the fringe and type of news, when you start realizing that, and this opens a whole Pandora's box, but when you start realizing that healthy people are not a profitable people, when you start realizing that, even though I'm not a marijuana user, that marijuana has a lot of health effects, positive health effects on people who suffer from certain diseases, including cancer, it really makes me wonder, is there a cure out there? And it takes me back to, I think, around 2004, 2005, 06, where there was a report on CTV in Canada. And I remember listening to Lloyd Robertson read the story on the news where they were talking about how at the University of Alberta, they actually found a cure for cancer. The problem was the cure was so cheap, there was no money to be made off of it, and therefore it pretty much got shelved. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not a fan of believing in the medical profession. Now, I think we have to separate the scientists who are striving for a cure and the scientists who are there for a buck.
Right.
There's two way different types of thinking. My cousin is a prominent doctor in Canada when it comes to diseases. Mm-hmm. And him and I have talked about this. And I said to him, his name is Darren. I said, Darren, I strongly believe that there are cures out there. And he is adamant that there isn't. Mm-hmm. Right? That's why there's millions upon millions, I mean, billions of dollars every year donated to things like cancer research. And we never seem any closer to a cure.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, my business background was involved in this. Like, I was working with some research institutes in Canada, cancer research institutes on clinical trials involving, I think that they were level 3 and 4 of lung cancers and throat cancers, and we were providing products as well as the placebos. And after 7 years, so this is how long the trials lasted, the phase 3 started off with the throat cancers, and the products that we were supplying were becoming so good that the patients who survived cancer were putting their testimonies online on blogs, like for cancer survivors. When the research institutes, I don't want to mention the name, discovered that after I was proud of sharing this news to them, they basically approached me back saying, can we reduce the dosage on what you are giving us, because the patients can't take it in. They can't swallow the products. It's becoming too hard for them. So
Right.
we diluted the products, and we also provided the same placebos, which were, just it was a double-blind trial. And at the end, they asked us to dilute it the third time, and we said no. That's when we realized that they want to kill the trial after 7 years. And shortly after that, they did a review in New York to say that the natural treatment was ineffective
Of course.
because this was the money agenda. They were earning money off their donations, and that's why they could apply for grants, and that's what justifies those people's salaries. They claim that they are not being paid for doing those trials, but they are being paid to be part of this institute in the first place, to achieve what they're doing.
Yeah.
The oncologists, you have to be paid. So,
Yeah.
they make better money with drugs than they do with natural cures. All right, so Dave, I would like to ask you, the question regarding your experiences after the angel of death. You channeled
Sure.
the angel of death. What happened to you afterwards?
Well, it's funny because there was this real rapid progression. A few days later, I went to a concert in Vancouver, and a friend of mine who used to work at the Playboy Mansion, she used to date a famous rock star.
Mm-hmm.
And when they broke up, I kept on saying, there's somebody more famous coming for you. I didn't know. I would say that for a couple years. And then I went 4 days after this event. I go to this concert in Vancouver, and I never name the band, and I never name her because it's not really my place to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this lead guitarist is on stage, and he's just hammering away. And I remember leaning over to my wife saying, "That's her next boyfriend." I don't know why. I just felt it. Never seen this guy. Didn't even know who he was until that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And she was sitting 4 rows behind, and she comes running up to me, taps us on our shoulders, and she's like, "I am in love." I said, "Well, you're going to meet him soon." 11 months later, she walked face to face into him at the Hard Rock Hotel in Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
And they started communicating, and I don't want to call it dating, but they were getting to know each other very, very well. The one thing that I've learned as I've advanced in this is timelines are very important. And you got to trust that inner voice to lead you down the timeline that you need to go. And she didn't follow that voice. And well, he's now married to someone else, But I mean, it started from there. And then all of a sudden, as I started getting a little bit more intuitive, and I do want to preface this, I don't call myself psychic. I don't call myself a medium. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I just know things are going to happen. Mm-hmm. And I don't practice it. I don't give readings. I don't really try to enhance anything that needs to be enhanced. I probably should, but I don't. It doesn't seem like the path I'm supposed to go on. Mm-hmm. But after that happened, we started getting a lot of, all of a sudden, paranormal activity in our house. Like, not things moving, like chairs rocking or glasses moving on, or anything weird like that. Just all of a sudden, you look out of the corner of your eye, you see someone standing there, and then you turn your head and look, and they're gone. Mm-hmm. So it started with that. I then met a gentleman by the name of Pascal Lachance, who is from Ontario, and he lived in BC at that time, and I was introduced to him. And I remember the first time I met him, I went to one of his meditation sessions, and I came right out of it. Like half an hour in, it was just like, okay, I'm not getting it. Like, he took me down this path with a bunch of other people. I saw everything that he was poaching. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, we're going to open up this door. We opened up the door, and poof, I was out. And I got to know him from there. And I remember him asking me point blank, "How far down the rabbit hole do you want to go?" Mm-hmm. And I said, "Well, let's just go all the way." He goes, "Are you sure? Because once you go through that, jump into the rabbit hole that deep, there's no coming back." Mm-hmm. And I said, "Well, let's do it." And that's kind of where it started. So the paranormal stuff happened. And then as I was working with Pascal, his own spiritual guides were telling him, "Dave, my guides keep telling me you need to start concentrating more on ETs and UFOs." And I said, "No, I have no desire for that. I have no intrigue. I saw fire in the sky. I know what happens. I couldn't finish the book Communion. I still haven't finished the book Communion. And I was just, kind of dumbfounded and a little pissed off that he wanted to take me down a path that I didn't feel comfortable in going.
But you had seen UFOs in the past, so you assume
but
comfortable with the idea of.
But there's a big difference between UFOs and ET contact.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's not so much of a difference between channeling the angel of death and channeling ETs.
Right, but in my mind, the angel of death was more ghostly and paranormal.
Okay.
Ghosts I was ready to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
I'd already seen the UFO, and I kind of got a little weirded out by that.
Mm-hmm.
Now getting into ET contact, that's a whole different kettle of fish, man.
Mm-hmm.
And I just I was like adamant. No, I am not going down. He goes, Dave, you don't have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way they want you to go, no matter what, whether you like it or not. They're going to take you there if they feel that's the path you need to go.
So Pascal was a psychic himself, or was he communicating himself?
He is what he calls a spiritual healer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he is someone who is very, very good at what he does, and I wish he would come out publicly because he has had such a profound effect on my life personally that it drives me nuts that he will not come out publicly, that where we can introduce him to the masses on Spaced Out Radio. He just doesn't feel like he's ready for that yet. But I mean, he's one of the most brilliant spiritual minds I have ever met. And, he's a big man. Okay. Like he's like 6'3", probably 350 pounds, big man. When you shake hands with him, sometimes just to test you, he'll give you a little squeeze. I mean, it's kind of like shaking hands with an offensive lineman on a football team.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's just a heart of gold, just a pure heart of gold, and someone that I spiritually trust. So when I have any issues or I have any questions, I can call him up and just say, hey, I need to talk.
Mm-hmm.
I need to figure this out.
Now, I'm pretty sure that the viewers would like to know how to contact him if he's available. Does he have a website, or is he?
No, he's hidden.
Okay.
He's completely hidden. When I can finally convince him to come out to the public, I promise you I will get you an interview with him.
Okay, thank you.
All
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I would have no problem doing that. Yeah, and plus, I mean, he's bilingual, so you can have it in English or French.
That's true.
Right?
So tell me more about the experience that you had after that, because you're putting us on edge now with your experience in the ET contact.
Well, I mean, in 2013, the UFOs started showing up.
Mm-hmm.
So the ghosts were still there. I was still practicing my channeling. And by the way, a real cool experience I had with Pascal, and I would recommend anybody to do this. Go into a completely dark, sealed room.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, where, we went into this room. He created this dark room in his house where, like he had black plastic bag sealed off with duct tape over top of another plastic bag, over top of another plastic bag, where there was literally no darkness. And him and I were sitting probably 2.5, 3 feet apart, could not see your hands in front of your face.
Mm-hmm.
It is amazing, my friend, what you see in your darkness. Like when you cannot see your fingers, like right there in front of your face, it's dark. Mm-hmm. Pitch dark.
Right.
And we actually, as him and I were meditating through this whole thing, we actually had like this, it almost looked like a solar system that was rotating above us. Mm-hmm. And spirits were coming in. I remember there was a head of a man right here. And I remember my old dog that I loved that passed away was sitting right here, and I could feel petting him. I remember picking up my hand like this and going like this and seeing the glow of my fingers, because believe it or not, what a lot of people don't realize is humans glow. Mm-hmm. We glow. Animals can see our glow.
What you are describing is what people will experience using their third eye.
Yeah.
So you'll have a spiritual experience, shedding the illusion of our environment and seeing the reality for what it's worth, and
Yeah.
seeing the cosmos through this illusion
Yeah.
of reality in the darkness.
Yeah, it was one of the most beautiful things. And like I said, I couldn't see Pascal. I knew he was there because him and I are communicating,
Mhm.
and I'm like, man, are you watching this? And he goes, dude, that is incredible. Like we just had the energy that him and I were pushing off each other to make all of this happen was fantastic. So we're working in 2013, we're working with me, and he's like, okay, well, what do you see coming up for yourself? And then I remember this was about April of 2013. And I said, I really see, or I really feel that I'm going to have an encounter with Bigfoot in the next couple of months. And I said, it seems to be around July 10th, July 20th. Well, all of a sudden, July came along and nothing happened, didn't see anything.
Mhm.
September 10th, around there, my friend and I had an encounter with two Sasquatch. And the first one was kind of hiding behind a tree about 100 yards or 100 feet in front of us.
Mhm.
The second one was after we had waved goodbye to him. Literally, we went, thank you very much for showing,
Mhm.
and peace, love, light, all of that to you. We're going to leave you alone now. And as we started to turn, I turned to my right, and I saw this tree branch shaking.
Mhm.
And that's where I saw the second one walk right through where that tree branch was shaking. So I'm going to assume, and it's an assumption here, but I'm going to assume there was three of them there. I only saw the two because there was the guy behind the tree that we watched. 2 seconds later, not even 2 seconds later, when I'm turning, I see that tree branch shaking. Something had to be shaking that tree branch. That's what I didn't see. That would have been number two. And then the guy who walked right through where that tree branch was shaking was number three. I got a full right side profile, back profile to the top of the head where it was pointy. And I could see that the point was kind of going down towards the face, but he never looked at me. I never saw him outside of that, but I was about 85 feet away from him. And I could tell you, my God, he was massive.
So how tall do you think he was?
7, 8 feet tall.
Okay. And you
Yeah.
said that you couldn't see their eyes.
No, he never showed me his face. He
Mhm.
never showed me his face. It was kind of like, okay, we're walking out of here and let's go.
And where was that located?
In Mission, British Columbia, it happened.
Okay.
Friends of mine. Now, let me explain this because as we go further on in this interview today, a lot of my experiences happened on my friend's former property.
Mhm.
They had 10 acres in the backwoods of Mission, British Columbia. They lived on a street where there was just two houses.
Mhm.
Okay. They had 10 and a half acres. The neighbor, or 10 acres, the neighbor had 6.5 acres, and both properties were kind of horseshoed by a forest. Now, that Bigfoot sighting happened about, 500 yards into the forest,
Mhm.
right? So it was, or 400 yards into the forest. It was pretty incredible, to say the least, when that happened. The next thing that started happening was I started noticing flashes in the sky.
Mhm.
And my wife and I, on hot summer nights, we'd go out on our patio and we'd count satellites.
Mhm.
And, sometimes we get 20, 30 satellites that we would see. We'd, be sitting on their patio on our lawn chairs, lying down, looking at the stars and sipping a cold beer or a glass of wine or whatever. Usually for me, it was Pepsi or Coca-Cola and, just enjoying a nice summer evening. And even in the fall, we would bundle up and bring blankets outside. Why not? Nice way to relax, right? So
Mhm.
we started seeing all of a sudden what I like to call these power ups, where all of a sudden it looks like you got this real small speck of light in the sky, and then all of a sudden it powers right up
Mhm.
and then shuts down. Well, one thing we started noticing was this started happening over our house all the time.
Mhm.
And it was very, very weird. And it wasn't until I did a little bit more research into it that I realized that, at 2 hours after sunset, the sun really can't reflect anything in a satellite's orbit over top of us. And number two, that satellites don't have lights on
Right.
them.
So
So
they do have solar panels, and when you see the ISS Lumiere station,
yeah,
you can see them very. You have this very bright
yes,
light in the sky because of the solar panels are obviously orientated towards the sun, and that's what you see. And then it dim
yeah,
as it goes, towards the on the horizon. So same thing goes with certain satellites as well. They would actually sometimes beam like a light, and I've seen
yes.
multiple times too, where they would go and dim, and then just do brighten up again, and then dim again, and brighten up again, and dim again. So still following the same path, but I guess certain satellites also rotate when
Yeah.
they turn. So the solar panels move constantly, and I guess other satellites are designed differently, so their solar panels will not be shaped the same way, and it will be reflected differently in the sky as well.
Well, I'll get to a story where I question that now on what I was seeing continually over my house.
Mhm.
Because as I said, I started all of a sudden the UFOs started showing up.
Mhm.
As Pascal had said, the UFOs were going to start showing up, and sure as shit, they did. Right.
Mhm.
I remember a couple of incidents where, all of a sudden we would call people over to our house and say, hey, why don't you come over? Well, I have a little, patio fireplace where you can, burn wood and all this. I said, why don't you come over? We'll have a little fire, we'll have a drink, and we'll watch some UFOs fly by.
Mhm.
Like all of a sudden I started just saying this stuff to friends, and they're like, yeah, sure. Well, the one time a couple friends came over and we saw this. I'm going to draw it out here. All
Okay,
right. I'm not a good artist, so please don't hold it against me. Okay.
that's
Um,
okay. While you're doing your drawing, and we'll be asking you a question in regards to the light
sure.
above your house. Was it stationary or was it actually in motion?
Which time?
The bright light you saw above your house, was it?
Like
It
the
was
like the
one.
flashing lights?
Yes,
They were in motion.
in motion.
Yeah.
And were they changing directions or were they going in the same?
The odd time, but we always at that point we always labeled them as satellites, right?
Right,
We
right.
did. I wasn't into the UFOs thing, so I'm going to show you that right there.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So friends come over to the house, and you know we're outside on the patio. It's about 9:55 in the evening, and all of a sudden we see this thing
Hmm.
right there. So the middle would have been that orange that you see. The orange is usually the color of street lamps.
Yeah.
Okay, and the orbs on the end were silver.
Okay.
Okay, so I looked to the southwest and I said, "Oh my God, there it is! What the f is that?"
Hmm.
And I pointed. My friends were like, "Where?" And two of them looked, and they looked, and I pointed where, and they were like, "Oh my God, oh my God!" And this thing goes ripping across the sky, like not fast, okay, but it was slow enough that we saw it for about 5-6 seconds,
Hmm.
but it was fast enough. There was no tail, that you would see on a comet or on a shooting star or a
Yeah.
piece of space debris coming down. There was no tail on it, and it wasn't falling. It was going straight,
And there was no
right?
noise.
No, and we watched it go southeast to northwest.
And the lights were not blinking or anything.
No, nothing. It
No.
was just this rod ripping across the sky.
Hmm.
So as we're talking about this, my friend's wife who grew up Catholic, she's freaking out, throwing a couple of Hail Marys all over the place. And, I don't like this. This is wrong. This is demonic. And I'm like, I don't know. And how did you know? How did you know that was going to happen? I don't know how it was going to happen, but it started happening. And then I remember saying to them, the funny part about it is, guys, I don't think we're done.
Hmm.
And they're like, well, what do you mean by that? I said, I have no idea. So 25 minutes later, when you take a sip of a can, like I got a can of Pepsi here, when you take a sip, you kind of
Hmm. Yep.
tilt your head
Backwards.
back.
Hmm.
Okay. So I tilt my head back, and I have a bottle of beer. I tilt my head back, and all of a sudden I went, oh my God, what the hell is that?
Hmm.
So above my house, there was a black triangle.
Hmm.
Okay. And that black triangle, as I'm doing this, I'm trying to quickly draw it out here. Okay. Was connected. Okay. There was no sound, no nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And underneath was the same orange rods connected by silver orbs.
Wow.
All right. And it just sat there and it moved really, really slow.
Mm-hmm.
I am having an absolute freak out. Okay. My friend's wife is having a damn near heart attack over this. And he's like, what the F? What the F?
Well,
Oh my.
how big would it look like to you from that standpoint?
Well, we're looking underneath it. All we see is the light carriage underneath of
Mm-hmm.
what we just saw 25 minutes previous of that, right?
Right, right. But how big do you think it was in the sky?
And I'm a little bit of an amateur aviation buff, military aviation buff, I would put it at the size of a B-2 bomber.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay.
Do you think it
And
was military?
I don't know. At the time, UFO, complete UFO. And here's what happened is we watched it fly straight, and this was a cloudless night. Okay, it's about 10:30 at night, so it's getting dark out. All
Mm-hmm.
right. Like it's not dark, it's still got that navy blue color in the
Mm-hmm.
sky.
Right.
Okay, and it was like a door opened up in the sky and this thing passed through. So as it entered this door, like it was going through a portal, it
Mm-hmm.
started to disappear.
Right.
Okay, until it was completely gone.
And was the portal a different color?
No, we couldn't see it literally just started disappearing.
Because I remember my wife and I went to Nevada. And we were kind of spotting through. We could see Area 51 from where we were at night, and we were just staking out, trying to see if we could
Yeah.
see something, rising. And then, sure enough, something happened. There was a portal that opened up in space that was orange,
Right.
and a white light came out of it and went straight towards the airport of Area 51, right down to the
Really?
base.
Yeah, that's weird. That's
Yeah.
weird.
But like I said, this is what I think more like secret programs will just use in terms
Yeah.
of photos in the sky. So when you describe that triangle, the reason why I said military, because first thing that came to my mind was like part of the secret space program.
Yeah, I have no idea, but I mean, you expect that in the United States, not in Canada, right?
Well, the space is universal, right? You can go anywhere you want.
Yeah, but I know that now, but back then, as I'm trying to concentrate to kill a mosquito here, um, my area has been totally. This entire summer has been totally run by mosquitoes. It's terrible, but nonetheless, at the time, it was a weird UFO. And we had another situation with a few weeks later where we invited friends over for a glass of wine on the patio. Come over, let's see a UFO. And we had this giant white orb, kind of like this, that just all of a sudden, it was ripping across the sky nice and slow. And then it did a night, and this is about, 4,000 feet,
Mhm.
all of a sudden it kind of did a 90-degree turn and then did a U-turn and came back this way and then just went like that.
Really?
Yeah. And we're all looking at this saying, what the hell was that? That
Right.
was fantastic. And it's funny because I called my old newsroom up about that. And I'm like, has anybody reported anything strange in the skies over Mission?
Mhm.
And my buddy John answered the phone. He's like, Dave, what are you smoking? What are you drinking? And I'm like, he's like, well, what did you see? I said, dude, we just saw something real weird. And he's like, well, just keep your party up, man. Like the entire cynicism that you get from mainstream media. And I felt, a little angry over that, but I mean, I understood, right?
It's interesting what you're saying because it's very common for experiencers and ufologists to experience an event in the sky that may other people from a different viewpoint may not see.
Yeah.
So sometimes it could be an angle thing. It could be that we are vibrating at a higher frequency, and
Could be.
somehow your ET contacts and your UFO contacts may have created something within you. The reason why you saw the angel of death may be all related to that. And that's kind of the belief I have. Yet I had many UFO sightings of my own, and I was with witnesses who'd never seen UFOs in their lives either. And they were petrified by the experience, but it also changed them. Because my wife was one of them. One of our best friends was with us as well when we saw them, and you could not mistake them for satellites. You could see like 7 lights in the sky right in front of us, like the size of 3 Boeings side by side, and you could see the lights flashing, but different colors of lights, and then the whole thing turned, and you could see a big bright white light in the back, and then it was heading towards the east. The west towards Port Renfrew from our standpoint in Duncan on Vancouver Island.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of sightings on Vancouver Island or in BC. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff going on. But that's a very interesting point that you're making about you saw them and then you contact other people in your neighborhood or in your community and they don't hear anything and they don't see anything.
Yeah. Right? And I remember talking to a lady at the RCMP about this, and I said, what am I supposed to do? She's like, well, just call it in. We love taking calls like this. And I'm like, okay, fine. So, there's a couple UFO groups that I did try and contact in British Columbia. This is way before I started Spaced Out Radio and before even Spaced Out Radio was a thought. And I was pretty disappointed in them because here I had this fantastic sighting. I'm looking for answers. I feel I'm pretty credible as a former journalist where I can take lots of detail on things, and to not even get a phone call back was very, very discouraging. And then, this leads us into 2014, where in March of 2014, I actually, to this day, I don't know if it was a dream or I don't know if I was actually taken. Mm-hmm. What I do remember is being put in a bright white room. Mm-hmm. I knew there was walls there, but I couldn't see them. And I remember this male voice coming across and said, as I'm standing there, I'm like, because I'm like, hello, just kind of looking around and not seeing anything but white light. Even though I knew there was a ceiling, I knew there was walls, I knew there was a floor. And I remember this male voice coming across and saying, Dave, we no longer want you researching anything to do with these topics. We no longer want you watching television shows, because I was, as I'm learning, I'm watching a lot of these paranormal television shows that were on cable, or UFO shows or whatever. They said, we don't want you listening to any radio. We don't want you reading any books. We don't want you joining any online forums. Do not go on any paranormal tours or join any paranormal groups. However, we give you permission to watch YouTube videos. And I laughed at this because it didn't make sense to me. I said, and I remember saying to them, whoever they are, I said, you're taking everything away from me. I'm just trying to figure out what the hell is going on. I don't understand. And then that male voice says, the answer is simple. You will be able to tell what is real and what is fake. Mm-hmm. And then it just kind of disappeared. So I woke up the next morning. I told my wife what happened, and she goes, well, are you going to follow that? And I said, I've gone this far. I'm just going to go with the flow. Mm-hmm. 3 weeks later, remember the flashing on the UFOs. Okay. Yeah. 3 weeks later, we're over at a friend's house where I saw the Bigfoot. Mm-hmm. Okay. And it was about 9:30 at night, and I started getting a migraine. So I said to my wife, because I had worked late at the office and I didn't get there till about 9 o'clock, and I was sitting on the couch and I had a glass of water or a cup of tea or something. And I said to my wife, I said, we're going to have to get going here soon because I'm starting to get a migraine. And when I deal with migraines, I usually at the start, in order to kind of combat them, I hop in the shower and take the shower as literally as hot as I can take it. I put a washcloth over my eyes. So that way I'm trying to get complete blackness into my mind or into my eyes, so that for me, it tames the pain. And it wasn't until about 20 minutes later, my wife said, "How you doing?" that I realized that I wasn't actually having a migraine. I was actually having pulsations happen on my head.
Mm-hmm.
It started as a square on the front of my head, went to the right side of my head as a triangle, went to the left side of my head as a circle. And then all of a sudden, I realized I was having an anxiety attack that I needed to go outside.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, please remember what I said earlier: 2 houses on the street, one 10 acres, one 6.5 acres, surrounded like a horseshoe with forest.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, I got to go outside. My wife says, "Why?" I said, "I'm picking something up. I need to go outside right now." She goes, "Oh," because my wife gets kind of excited. And she goes, "Oh, can I come with you?" And I said, "No, you need to stay inside with the boy." Our son was about 9 months old at that time,
Mm-hmm.
and he was still breastfeeding, and she had to stay inside with him. All right. So then another friend, the people who own the property, she says to her husband, "Dave is picking something up. We need to go outside right now." And I looked at her and I said, "He's not invited."
Mm-hmm.
Why would I tell someone they're not invited on their own property, man?
I know that's true.
Right? So I looked at her and I said, "You and I need to go outside right now. Get your shoes on right now." So I raced over to the door. I put my shoes on. She races to the door, puts her shoes on. We walk behind the house, and behind the house, about 50 feet, there's an old wooden horse fence.
Mm-hmm.
And we're standing there, and you could feel it. It was as one of these low cloud nights where, it's very misty and very, it looks like the Legend of Sleepy Hollow out there
Right,
at this
right.
point without the bridge. And she goes, "Wow," because she was very intuitive. And she goes, "Wow, this is heavy." I'm like, "Yeah." I said, "Are you feeling that?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm totally feeling it." And we're having all this small talk. She goes, so we stop at the fence, and she's like, "Well, why don't they called you outside? Why don't you see where they are?" So I said, "Okay." I said, "Out of God's peace, love, and light, you called us outside. Can you please show us where you are?" Now, before I go any further, I want you to know, Sebastian, that I am talking at this volume.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that I am talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm in a field that is surrounded by trees, and there's a tree line in between the 2 properties that probably stretches 100 feet across,
Mm-hmm.
okay, my voice is not going to echo very well,
No, no.
especially in a low, misty, heavy, moist night.
It was your intent. It was all about your
Yeah.
intent.
So I said, "Out of God's peace, love, and light, can you please show us where you are?" And 150 yards away from the neighbor's back field, tucked by the forest, it was like a light switch went on.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a UFO sitting right there on the ground that I could see through the trees. The lights were emanating through the trees. It was the most beautiful, bright white light I have ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
What I remembered about that light, Sebastian, was as bright as it wasn't hard on the eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Right.
for instance, if I look up at my lights right now, they're bright. I'm going to blink.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try and protect my eyes from that brightness,
Mm-hmm.
not this. So it's the light's emanating through the trees, and it was on for about 30 seconds, and then it went off.
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Thank you." I said, "If you are of alien descent, out of God's peace, love, and light, can you turn your lights back on?" Bang, lights come on my command. Well, let me reverse for just a minute here. So what is going through my mind at this time is the journalistic side. Okay, I start thinking, all right, is it one of those 100,000 candle watt flashlights that people can get and they're shining? Okay, no, the light isn't moving, it isn't shaking. Okay, maybe it's on the ground. Now, do I see shadows moving? No, there are no shadows moving. Do I hear people? So I as the light is on, I'm listening. Do I hear people laughing, talking, whatever it may be? No, there are no people there. Now, what do I know about the people who live next door? They have no kids. They usually are in bed about 9 o'clock because at that point they were a late 60s couple.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And your wife was next to you and she could see the same thing as you.
Well, my friend's wife was, and
Your friend's wife, sorry, yes.
Yeah, she's watching this too. And so the second time the lights went on, they were wider through the trees. The whiteness was brighter. And then I started kind of looking. Now I needed to get closer. So or not closer, but a different vantage point. So I remember looking through the trees because I saw something blue in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't figure out what it was. So I moved to my right about 15 feet, 20 feet, and I found this view right through the trees that was just perfect. And that's where I saw this vertical blue cylinder standing right there. Okay. The white light was not touching that blue cylinder.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It was like emanating from the bottom of it and all around it, but it was not touching that blue cylinder.
Mm-hmm.
And the blue cylinder had a counterclockwise cloud, black cloud that would be around here. Then it would rotate up halfway, and then it would rotate back down to the bottom. And then after about 30 seconds, the lights went off.
Mm-hmm.
So my friend's wife says, let's walk over there. And I said, absolutely not. I said, because I am not going back in your house alone telling them that you got taken by aliens right now. Right. And I said, we don't know what this is. I'm not putting up with this. You're not leaving me. That's an order. Like I actually played the man card here. Okay. Mm-hmm. Like I had no choice. I am panicking, my friend. Mm-hmm. And she finally got it and understood it. And she goes, okay, fine. She goes, well, why don't you see if they'll turn their lights on again? So I said, okay. I said, just so I know I'm not crazy. Mm-hmm. Out of God's peace, love, and light, can you turn on your lights one final time? Bang, lights come on. 150 yards away, as per usual, I see the blue cylinder. I see the black cloud counterclockwise rotating. And then it turned its lights off after about 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. And then on, and then off. Then on, then off. 10 times. On and off.
Wow.
What was happening over top of my house the year previous?
Mm-hmm.
The flashing of the lights on and off over top of my house. The power-ups.
So you never asked them, because obviously you had a communication going on. You couldn't ask them what race of ETs they were?
Buddy, you got to realize this was my introduction.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to use the term, I was shitting bricks.
Right. Have you received any confirmation of who they were after the facts? No, never since.
No. 5 days later, I meet a young lady named Samantha Mowat. Mm-hmm. I went back to the house pretty much I had about 5 hours sleep in 5 days because this had really, really screwed me up. And it was a Wednesday, and I went over to their house because we were meeting this lady named Samantha Mowat, who was a lifelong ET contact. And so we meet her, and I'm kind of pacing around the house, and Samantha doesn't know me from a hole in the wall. And she says, "You look like you need to go outside." I said, "Yeah." I told her what happened. She goes, "Well, do you mind if I come with you? I'd like to see where this craft was." And I said, "Sure." So I take her to the back field, and I'm showing her from our friend's field over to where the neighbors, where this craft was. Now, I can't tell you if it was a disc, if it was a rod, it was an orb. The only thing that I truly saw was the blue cylinder standing vertical.
Right.
So Samantha, being very intuitive and very in touch with her ET contactee or ET contacts, basically says, "Okay, I'm picking it up." And then she turns to me and says, "Dave, now this is 2:00 in the afternoon. There's not a cloud in the sky, not an airplane in the sky," which was weird. And, considering we were on a flight path, and all the kids are at school. Okay. It's a Wednesday afternoon. And she looks at me and she goes, "Dave, I'm getting something from the forest. Would you like to go back in there with me?" What the hell? I just had ET land on the lawn over here, and what the hell? She goes, "Okay, we're probably going to see something." I took a deep breath and I said, "Yeah, I know." And now reality is kind of kicking in. And from there, she goes, "Okay, however, I'm not sure if we're going to see anything because from what I know, extraterrestrials don't like dogs." And we used to bring our two dogs over there to run around because it's 10 acres and let them run around. And the farm had two dogs as well. So all the dogs were friends. They would run around and play, and then they would relax and then they'd go play. Well, the dogs are surrounding us because we're back there. And I said, well, let's just see what happens. She goes, okay. So we start to walk towards the forest. There's kind of a little bit of a dip in my friend's property. And then there's a fence line. And then you walk into this cathedral of 70, 80-foot Douglas fir trees, right? Beautiful.
Right.
Big trees. And we walk in there and all the dogs, seeing the direction that we're going, they run into the forest. So we walk into the forest and we start walking in and, we see the dogs running around, but we got about 50 yards into the forest and we realized all the dogs were gone. Mm-hmm. Samantha actually noticed it first. She stopped me and she says, Dave, where's the dogs? And looking around, could not see any of the 4 dogs. So, being stupid white people, we decided to keep on walking in, So we continue walking into the forest. We walk about another 50 yards in, and Samantha stops me again. And she says, Dave, I need you to look at me for a second. I said, okay. She goes, I want you to look that way. And she points due north. Mm-hmm. And she goes, I want you to tell me what you see. So I took a deep breath and I turned and looked, and you've been in forest before and you'll understand, and anybody who has been in a forest before, a really thick, dense forest, you'll understand with what I'm saying here is, if you're in some big trees, mm-hmm. The forest may seem really thick above, but down below underneath the canopy, it's quite open. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the scenario we were in. So I took a deep breath and I turned and I looked due north. And my words were, Samantha, what the F is that? Samantha, what the F is that? What the F is that, Samantha? Samantha, what the F is that? Because 200 feet in front of me, there was a 10 to 12 foot extraterrestrial standing there staring back at me.
And can you describe the ET?
Hard to describe. I can describe his color. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to draw a picture of him once again. I am no Michelangelo, so please. Okay, so you got to realize there's trees on this side. Okay, there's trees over here. There's a log that's kind of lying on the ground, and here's this guy kind of standing there.
Could you see like the outfit? Was he wearing any clothes?
No.
No? Was it because it was too dark?
That's what he looked like right there.
Okay.
Okay, he was long, and the round head was staring back at us. Mm-hmm. And, I didn't see any arms. I didn't see any legs. Mm-hmm. I just knew that this guy was looking at us. Okay. And I'm sitting there standing 200 feet in front of him saying, Samantha, what the F is that? Mm-hmm. So it's funny because I'm going to jump ahead here for a second. It wasn't until 5 months later at Johnny Enoch's UFO conference that he held in 2015 that I realized, in 2014, that I realized that Samantha and I were actually, because I was helping her with her presentation, that her and I actually saw 2 different beings.
Wow.
So from April until August, when we were working on this, we thought we were talking about the same being. So basically, I'm staring at this guy. She is staring at a little gray dude. All right. She's staring at a little gray dude over mm-hmm. here.
Okay.
I don't see him.
Mm-hmm.
I am so focused on this guy here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. She starts telecommunicating with that guy.
Okay.
The little guy. And the little guy says to her, how can I put this? He says to her, you are more than welcome to come say hello. We're not here to take you. We're not here to harm you. However, we are very concerned about the man's health.
Your health.
My health. Because inside, I'm freaking out.
Right.
Okay. Externally, I'm trying. I always laugh, Sebastian. I'm going to give this example, and I know I'm taking the long route here. I apologize.
That's okay.
But I'm going to give the long route here. You always, on Spaced Out Radio every now and again, I'll ask my audience who's never really experienced anything, how would you react? And you always got the people, I'd grab my cell phone and start taking pictures or video or whatever. When your eyes are seeing something that your brain cannot comprehend, you do not think of your cell phone. You don't think of recording or taking pictures. This is how I know most of the stuff out there is fake, because people who have never experienced it before will never, ever think of picking up their cell phone. They will not, unless they are the most cold, callous person who doesn't give a care about anything, right?
You're right. I mean, look, I've seen countless UFOs in my life, and I still feel shocked at the sights I see.
Absolutely.
And plus, I took pictures of one in broad daylight in Mexico, and my wife was there, but it took us a while to react to it, because at first, you're just absorbed by the sighting, and you don't really think of taking a picture right away.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because you're trying to comprehend in your brain, is this real? So this is how I like to explain it. Okay. Imagine, these pieces of paper here. Imagine that this is every rule in your life that you have been given, from your parents to your grandparents to your uncles and aunts, your cousins, your teachers, your coaches, your minister, or whatever. And then some complete stranger comes and says, you got a rule book there. Well, you don't need that anymore. Let's just rip that up and throw that in the garbage. That's how it felt for me, because in my 40 years of life at this point, I was 40 years old. I'm sitting here thinking, nobody ever told me, all right? Nobody ever told me what it was like to experience this stuff. Out of all the life lessons that I had, nobody ever said, by the way, God is real. You want to be a good guy. Otherwise you're going to go to hell, and you're going to go spend eternity with the devil. Right. Well, nobody tells you how to react when you got a 12-foot extraterrestrial standing facing you. Nobody tells you how to react, when you're being invited over. And I told Samantha, I begged Samantha, do not leave me. Do not leave me. Do not go over there. Because she was walking over there. And
she wasn't telling you that she was having this conversation with that gray in the first place.
Oh, yeah. She was telling me. Now, the gray was a tan color.
Okay.
So it was a tan color, and I use the term gray because everybody signifies the grays with the big head, the black eyes, the thin body. Okay, this had the tan body with the black eyes and, tanned head. All right. And so she starts walking over there, and I'm like, and I begged her, I said, please do not leave me here. I said, I do not want to go back to that house alone. You don't know what they are. These could be really bad. Like, I am freaking the hell out here. And so she decided to stay. And we watched them face to face for about 15 minutes. I never saw that little gray dude. I only saw the big guy.
So you were concerned about the tall gray, so what color was that tall?
He started off as a creamy colored white, like an off-white, and then he eventually morphed into a tan color, like when you pour cream in coffee. Right?
Do you think it was a mental projection from the gray? Because I know that's what they do.
No, this was completely physical. Like, looking back at it in my mind right now, I can see it completely. I think the reason why they didn't let me see the other guy, okay, I think they had complete control of that situation. I think they were caring. I think they were loving.
Okay, so that's what you felt.
Yeah, there was, like, I didn't feel fear.
Right.
I want to preface this. I didn't feel fear. What I was scared of, Sebastian, was the fact that everything I had learned in my life up until that point, in my first 40 years, was now useless. Okay. Sure, you take some life rules, you treat people well, you have your beliefs, and you try and do your best at everything, but nobody tells you how to react when you got a 12-foot extraterrestrial at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Wednesday standing right in front of you.
Right.
Excuse me. So, I mean, that is, to this day, I don't know how to comprehend that.
Mm-hmm.
And, the fear wasn't about seeing the creatures. It was this internal fight inside myself that I could not figure out what it was that I'm seeing, because this, what I am seeing, is not supposed to be real.
Mm-hmm.
And here it is, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. No clouds in the sky, no airplanes in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
Samantha then started getting called to a different part of the forest, and she wanted to go check that out. And we went and checked that out and left those two there, or at that point we thought it was just the one guy, left them there. And then we walked to the other part of the forest and to see, because she was feeling more of them. And she goes, okay, I want you to tell me the first number that comes in your head. I said 5. She goes, I'm thinking 18. And I said, well, what does that mean? She goes, that's how many more beings I believe are in this forest right now. And I went, okay. So we're standing there. We find this opening and we're standing still and we're looking through the forest, and you see things move out of the corner of your eye very fast. And by the time you turn your head, there's nothing there. I mean, could have been a bird, could have been, sticks falling, because, tree branches are always breaking and falling, whether it's nature, whether it's wind, whether it's squirrels.
Right.
And, didn't see anything. So I said, well, let's go back to the other site and see if those two were still there. I think that was their escape plan, because they were gone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They were gone. And that's how they were able to leave and not allow us to see them, how they left,
Mm-hmm.
because they,
it's funny you are saying that, as soon as you said that, it reminded me of my own experience on Mount Shasta, when I saw Lemurian individuals on top of a mountain on Mount Shastina. And I thought they were Tibetan flags to begin with. And at the same time, while I was observing them, I felt observed from other places. So that made me look somewhere else. And that's when I came back to look at them, they were gone as well. So I guess it's a distraction tactic. They always try to distract you to do something else so they can escape easily, and you don't try to see where they're going and what kind of.
And you're exactly right there. And so when we went back to the other spot, there was nothing there. They were gone. We walked back to the house, from the forest back to the property. And as soon as we started getting close to the property, all 4 dogs came and greeted us.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
But, since then, my UFO encounters have continued. I have a few months after that, I was abducted for the first time. I'm still implanted in the back of my head. Every time I tell the story, I get little pulsations. Well, you
have to share that.
Well, and I want to preface this, okay, everyone who is viewing. Okay, I told this story when we were sitting down with Sebastian and a gentleman named Joel about this implant story, and I actually took Sebastian's hand and placed it on the back of my head. And after I'm done the story, Sebastian, I want you to tell everybody what you felt.
Sure.
Okay, so there's a little bit of confirmation there. So it was funny because it was right after Johnny Enoch's UFO conference in Surrey at the same hotel where Architects of the New Paradigm was, and I emceed that event. And that event was on September 27th, and September 30th, I was doing a channeling with my wife on our patio. And, she's probably 3 feet in front of me on the lawn chair, and I'm sitting there. And, you'll understand this because you're a spiritual. So for spiritual people, you'll understand, excuse me, what I'm saying. Excuse me. What I'm saying, when sometimes you see more with your eyes closed than you do with your eyes open.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm concentrating, I'm meditating, I'm getting myself into my channeling area where I felt I needed to channel. And all of a sudden, right behind my wife, I see her sitting there, and I've got my eyes closed, and right beside her, kind of leaning from the lawn chair, looking at me from behind her, is this little gray dude. And I remember saying, "Oh, hi, how are you?" And then he tipped his head back and he was gone. And my wife's like, "Well, was that for me?" I said, "No, there were." I said, through my third eye, I just saw a little gray dude behind you, peering behind the chair. She goes, "Oh, cool." So thought nothing of it. I did my channeling session and whatever, and went to bed that night. Well,
can I ask you, the gray dude, was he the same tan color as?
no, he was
No,
gray.
he was gray. Okay.
So that night, I get woken up by the feeling of little children's fingers on the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I realize I'm lying on my stomach. I pick my head up and I look to the right, and it's all black. And my face was in one of those, if you have a massage, you're on a massage table, they have that donut that you put your donut
the headrest,
headrest so you can breathe.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. So my head is in there. And I picked my head up, I turned it this way, and I looked over my shoulder because that's where the light was coming from. And I saw the same little gray dude with two of his buddies, looked identical, standing there. They had silverish black suits on, and the light was there. So I'm like, holy shit, I got taken. And I'm thinking, and I'm literally laying there thinking, God, this is cool. This is really cool. And I remember I just put my head back down in the pillow. And I then felt a knife cut open the back of my scalp. And the one little dude moved over my left shoulder, and I could feel him there. And he took his hands and he started pulling my skin up towards my forehead. And I'm like, oh, that just doesn't feel good. Right. And then I heard, and I don't know what this machine was, but I'm going to call it a saw.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt it, and that they started sawing the back of my skull. And I remember screaming and like, God, this hurts and it doesn't feel good. And this is just not very Christian of what they are doing. And then all of a sudden I heard Samantha Mowatt's voice. When her voice, when we came out of the forest that day, she asked me point blank, and it's funny, she does not remember this, and I remember it clear as day. She asked me point blank, she goes, Dave, have you ever been taken? And I said, no. And I remember her saying, well, there's a good chance you're going to be now that you've had this experience. Just remember, it doesn't hurt. You only think it hurts, but it doesn't. So all of a sudden, as I'm screaming, hearing this saw cut into my scalp, or pardon me, my skull, I hear her voice saying, remember, Dave, it doesn't hurt. Pain went away. All of a sudden, it starts tickling. And I'm like, okay, this is kind of cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
kind
all of a sudden, yeah. And so then after they put the saw away, it's like the second guy. So I got this guy here who's still pulling on my skin. I've got another guy beside him trying to pull up my scalp while the third guy is trying to jam something in there, and they're struggling with it. And I remember through this donut, okay, all of a sudden I had the urge to piss.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is where my story gets a little funny. And I remember Lorian Fenton, who's dealt with experiencers for the last 25 years. When I told her this story, she started laughing. She goes, Dave, you know how I know you're telling me the truth? I said, how? She goes, because nobody would ever make up the fact that you got into an argument with aliens to get you back because you had to take a pee.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So here's what happens. When you've been drinking a while, Sebastian, and you're out with the boys, or you're out at a nightclub, or back in the party days, and you're sipping the cocktails, and all of a sudden you got to break the seal. And it hurts. When you got to pee so bad, it hurts. That's what I'm going through. And I'm holding it, and I'm holding it. And finally, I just couldn't hold it any longer. And I started yelling at him. I said, guys, you got to hurry up here and get me back. I said, I got to piss like a racehorse. I am not peeing all over your table. So hurry up, get done, get me back so I can go to the bathroom. And I just kept on repeating this. Next thing I know, I wake up on top of my blankets, face down in my pillow. My head is absolutely going thump, 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 thump. So I'm running to the bathroom with I'm left-handed, so my right hand is on the back of my head. My left hand, I'm trying to get my underwear down. I must have stood there for about 5 minutes peeing. And it was one of the best pisses of my life, to be absolutely honest. But here I'm thinking, holy cow, this is completely real. And that was the first time I got taken. So at Architects of the New Paradigm the night before, I actually shared this story with you, and I asked you to move your hand to where I was implanted. And you actually put your hand on the back of my head. What did you feel?
It was pulsating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pulsating right now. I can feel it. So explain that pulsating that you felt.
It was not like your average pulsation from it was more like a heartbeat. It was feeling alive. Like there was something to it that was intelligent. That's the first thing I noticed about it, that there was some kind of communication device directly linked to your organs or your brain. So somehow the way I saw it was, again, intuitively speaking, I think that this device allows them to see and feel your experiences the way you see it.
Yeah.
Now, tell me if I'm wrong. We never discussed that afterwards.
Well, I mean, I've never really put that together. I just think it's funny that every time I tell that story, it starts to pulsate. And you're not the first person to feel that pulsation. It's kind of like my little paranormal trick that I do with people. And
you never thought of trying to have an X-ray to see if there was anything there?
No, man.
You should try.
The one thing that I will preface is when I started having all of these experiences, I've never looked to make money off of them or videos off of them or anything. I've always taken them that the experience is for me, and when I'm ready for the answer, I'll get the answer. I've kind of just left it in their hands, whoever they are.
Right. Don't you think that it's kind of, in a way, an offense to your own free will? Like, were you volunteering for this experience? I guess you were.
Maybe.
You wanted to have an experience.
Maybe.
I've spoken to many abductees before who share the same experience, I think deep down they wanted the experience. But then some of the abductees were not as pleased with their experience, and they felt traumatized by it, and they were still being abducted. So I kept telling them, I said, if you really want the experience to stop, all you have to use is your free will, because they cannot take you against your free will, even if you think they are. Deep down, you want to be part of this. You want to have the experience. You want to believe in this. And I think that's the kind of ruse they use to abduct you and to carry on the experiment. So in your case, what I'm trying to say is maybe you should try to dive into the subject for doing the X-ray just for your own sake, simply because it might be a piece of metal that might be seen through X-rays. But I also know that there are certain components that cannot be seen through X-rays, but MRIs. And I know that from Dr. Lear directly. So, he's passed away, but he was specializing in human or implants to do with ET implants. And the diversity of implants that are out there are numerous. There are so many different forms, from look like bones, cartilage to metal. It's limitless as to what it could be. But what makes me wonder is, did you have anything arising from this experience? Like, did you have any?
That was the first and last time I saw those guys.
Right, but did you have any psychic abilities arising from that, like a Kundalini awakening or any other things?
No. I just kind of went with the flow. Like that was the next step that was supposed to happen. Right, and it was funny because this was September 30th, October 2nd. Johnny Enoch comes over to my house, and he says, "Dave, we got to get you back on the radio." No, I'm not going back on the radio, John. I've already done the radio thing. I'm not going back. I made a promise to myself and my daughter. I'm not going back. Well, you broadcast online. I said, well, I've never heard of internet radio before. And I said, how do you do that? I don't have a microphone. I don't have a studio. Oh, you plug it right into the internet. And, and he convinced me to start Spaced Out Radio that night. And 7 weeks later, we launched Spaced Out Radio on November 30th, 2014. Mm-hmm. And little did I know that was the life path that I was needing to go. And I think the reason why all of these experiences have happened, and some even continue to happen, is because they wanted me to be able to relay and get in touch with the audience about their experiences, that it seems to be a lost and forgotten art when it comes to online or radio programming, because everybody is so fixated on disclosure and so fixated on what the government is hiding that people have forgotten about the personal experiences. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that's where it kind of comes into play.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned personal sightings of 6 extraterrestrials, and one of them that you nicknamed Carl. Can you elaborate on that story, please?
Carl, if you're viewing this, I'm going to tell you right now, you still owe me a flight.
Okay.
Damn it, Carl. Damn you, Carl. All right. Carl, April 20th, 2015, I'm interviewing a gentleman named Harvey Kraft on Spaced Out Radio. We are talking about Buddha, of all topics. Mm-hmm. I hadn't had an experience in a while. I was getting concerned. And for some reason, for the previous 3 nights, I had left my outside lights off. I lived in a rancher in a subdivision. So when you look at a rancher, you have, from the outside, you have your living room, and then you have the front door, and then you have like a bedroom / den, and then you have the garage. I mean, every rancher kind of looks the same. So I had turned that upstairs bedroom into the Spaced Out Radio studio. We had one of these houses where if people dropped over at 10 o'clock at night for coffee, it was nothing new. Mm-hmm. Our door was always open to friends and family and whoever. So here I am 17 minutes into the show, and I see something out of the corner of my eye move. And I'm like, oh, crap. Someone's going to come to the front door. They're going to ring the doorbell. They've forgotten that I have got this show, and the dogs are going to start barking, and I got a Chihuahua Dachshund cross that on a crosswind, that's worth 30 minutes of barking. And she just doesn't shut up. And I'm thinking, oh, God, this is not going to sound good, and we're live. Well, my dogs didn't start barking. So what happened was I actually Harvey started answering my question. I put my microphone on mute, and I kind of rotated my chair this way. Mm-hmm. And I looked out the window, which was about 3 feet from me. And from the bottom corner of the window, I saw the big black eyes. And then I saw the forehead and this giant headed gray with very bony structure. I'm going to show you a picture here.
So when you said giant, like how tall was he?
I'm going to say he was 5 to 6 feet, but this is kind of what he looked like.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's the best picture I've been able to find of what he looks like. Hold on. I'll give you that again because I keep it on my, all right. Very bony structure around the eyes. The mouth was a slit. And then I kind of, did the manly thing. I almost fall back out of my chair. I turn and look, and he is gone.
Did you see the arms?
No,
just the bust?
The head was massive, okay? Mm-hmm. The head was double, triple, like all I saw was it happened in such a, another one of those split second situations. Mm-hmm. Am I really seeing this? Holy cow, I am. I panicked. I kind of jumped back in my chair. And then, I still got a show. My guest I can hear him talking in my headphones. Right. And I immediately grabbed my phone I got up from my chair. I go over to the window and I'm looking, I'm like, how the hell did I would see anybody running away? Mm-hmm. There wasn't enough time for me not to see somebody running away. And he was just gone.
Mm-hmm.
So Harvey finishes, and I had to get back on the air, and I said, Harvey, hey, we just had something weird happen here. And I kind of went off on that, and he's like, holy cow. So in the meantime, I'm texting my wife, because my wife is quite empathic.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, alien at window during show now, get in here. So here she comes in, and she starts putting her hands up to get a feel for the energy in the place. And her hands go, my wife always has ice cold hands, and her hands are burning.
Mm-hmm.
So she immediately, while I'm doing the show, she's Palo Santoing the shit out of everything. And, to this day, it's hilarious when I look back at it, but it was a panic situation. So I actually got a hold of a friend of mine, a guy named R. Keith Andrews. He's out of Kelowna, British Columbia. On Spaced Out Radio, we call him our ET guru, because he's had lifelong experiences and just breaks it down brilliantly. A lot of people think he's wacko, but I think he's pretty bang on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I call him up and I tell him what happened. And he's like, well, he says, Dave, what do you expect? Your show is growing. It's catching the attention. You are picking up, these species that are flying around Earth can obviously hear what you're talking about by picking up the signal. He goes, what do you expect? Of course, you're talking about aliens. They're going to come check you out.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Well, that kind of makes sense. So over time, a few months later, I figured, the guy needs a name. So I came up with Carl.
Mm-hmm.
And Carl has kind of become the Spaced Out Radio mascot. Now, usually the follow-up question from people who ask me that story is, has he ever come back?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. When you have an experience, okay, that is so profound, the one thing that I can tell you is you pick up the energy field that they give off right away. So for instance, if I'm out in the forest and I feel I'm being watched by Bigfoot because I've had that Bigfoot experience before, I recognize the energetic feeling of when they're around. And I've only had that once or twice ever since then. Did I see them? No. All right. But nonetheless, you pick up that energetic feeling. Much the same as if you got ghosts in your house, you pick up that energetic feeling. Well, with Carl, he has a very specific pattern where we just have this connection.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I don't know why. Peeping Tom alien in the window, and it's funny. Let me preface this. I have gotten into so many arguments, like people condemning Stan Romanek's video of the alien in the window.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's fake. That's fake. That never happens. Never heard that happen. Well, it's happened to me. I don't know if it's real or not.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I've never met Stan Romanek. I know he's gotten some heat, but maybe that video is real. So just remember, other people have had that experience. Still your choice whether you want to believe or not.
Right. Well, I know that James Fox, tried to crucify him through his own show when he came over to his house and trying to repeat that experience. And it looked believable based on what they tried to recreate for very, very cheaply.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess people commented on his reaction and these sort of things. I mean, who knows, right? I mean,
yeah, but how do you react?
If you're not there,
how do you react?
Well, that's the thing. He reacted like he just kind of jumped backwards a bit,
he got the heebie-jeebies and he ran away. I mean,
right.
My God, man. I mean, I've run away before, but I mean, we can get into another 6 hours debating everything Stan Romanek.
Right.
That's
true.
But in this case, the energetic experience that I recognize, it was last October. And I had Olaf Phillips on from Paranoia Magazine, and we were talking secret space program. And Olaf is a very, very bright mind when it comes to the secret space program. And I would highly recommend you get him on if you get the opportunity. And Olaf and I were chatting, and it was about 11:35, so about 25 minutes to go in my show. And all of a sudden, I just perked up, and I looked out the window. And I kind of paused, and I said, just a sec, Olaf. Just a sec. He's like, what's going on? Because now he's like used to weird crap happening to me while I'm doing the show. And I said, I feel Carl. And he's like, what? I said, I feel Carl. He's like, well, do you see him out your window? I'm like, no, I don't see him. I'm expecting him at the window. I can't see him, but I feel him. I know he is here. So after the show ends, I still got Olaf on the phone, and I got kind of a two-tiered driveway. I got a long driveway, and it's kind of two-tiered. And my vehicles are parked down below, side by side. And I got a a Jeep Grand Cherokee, and I got a pickup truck. And there's about 5 feet in between the vehicles. And all of a sudden, I see these kind of like this yin and yang Nike swooshes, one this going this way and one this way. They kind of float this way together in between the two vehicles at about 6 feet, and then they floated back. Mm-hmm. So I said, Olaf, stay on the phone, man. I said, just in case I get abducted or something happens, I got to check this out. So brave little Dave here walks over to the vehicles. Nothing there. In the meantime, I start hearing this weird sound. Remember the movie Signs? Mm-hmm. I start hearing this. I'm like, what the hell is that? I said, Olaf, I got to call my ET guy, Keith. Find out what's going on. So I'm getting scared now. Okay. Right. Like literally, I'm getting scared. So I go inside my house underneath my carport. I go upstairs. I go out on top of my carport, which is my patio. Mm-hmm. And I'm standing there because now I feel safe. If I see anything, I have distance.
Right.
Plus, if I got to go attack something just because it's cool, or I got to go run to, take my ride on the spaceship, mm-hmm. I can just walk down my stairs.
Right.
But, there's a lot of bears and cougars and moose and deadly animals in my area too. So it's more out of safety. Mm-hmm. So anyways, I've got my flashlight. I've got our Keith Andrews on the phone. And I said, Keith, I have a feeling Carl's here. I got the energy. He goes, oh, cool. And as this is going on, previous to this, like I said, I heard the clicking. One of the clicks was coming up my driveway from the top of my driveway, and the other one was coming from my backyard. And out of nowhere, Keith, who doesn't know where I live, doesn't know what my backyard looks like or my house or anything. I mean, he lives 4 hours away from me. He says, by the way, Dave, have you heard any strange sounds? I said, well, what do you mean? Strange sounds? And he goes, have like a clicking sound. I went, yes. I said, I heard this. He goes, well, that's not quite it. Does it sound more like this? And he did this thing with his throat, and that almost sounded like a croaking of a frog, but combined with the clicking sound. Mm-hmm. And I went, that's it. And as soon as I said, that's it, from my backyard, mm-hmm. right? And I'm like, he goes, yeah, they're having a conversation about you right now. And I'm like, what? He goes, well, this is what I'm picking up, because he's very intuitive. He goes, I'm picking up Carl and his buddy in the backyard, but their other buddy is up your driveway. And the two, not Carl, but the other two are having a little bit of a freak out session here right now. Because usually when humans know when they're around, humans run away. Mm-hmm. And these two are having a freak out session right now because you're standing your ground.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so I never saw them that night, but to hear them, oh, that was weird. Mm-hmm. And to know that, it was almost identical to the sounds of the movie Signs with M. Night Shyamalan. Yeah. Where the hell did he get that sound from?
That's true.
I mean, it was phenomenal. And so now every time I go outside, I'm like, I'm sure a horse is going to show up one day, but nonetheless, it was weird.
Mm-hmm. Well, on that note, Dave, I think you are the gift to the gab. You could talk forever and ever, right? You are used to that on your radio show.
It's what I do.
I do apologize, but we are running out of time, and I need to close this session. I'm sure we probably will be chatting again on various other sessions. If you want to do another interview, I will welcome you anytime you like. But I would like to thank you for your time again, for sharing your experiences with us. And I hope that the viewers will be making some comments on the websites and on the YouTube channel. And hopefully we can just relay the information, the questions to you, and then you can answer them the best you can. In the meantime, I'd like to thank you, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to bring Spaced Out Radio to your audience. What a fantastic time. And you're a good friend, Sebastian, and I look forward to communicating with you more.
All right. Thanks, Dave. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.